third-year medical student at SUNY Downstate. I just finished my peds rotation and I'll be talking about that. So if you want to hear more, keep watching. So peds is split into three different parts. One, you have 2 weeks of inpatient. The second part, you have 2 weeks of outpatient, and the third part is a week of NICU and a week of nursery. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those, and then I'll talk about my personal favorite and least favorite parts about my peds rotation. This is a disclaimer, I'm interested in peds, so anything I say, I like pediatrics myself, so I guess just keep that in mind as you're going through the video. So the first thing I noticed as soon as I started my pediatrics rotation from day one, from orientation, was the atmosphere. Like, I came from OBGYN and now heading into peds, the atmosphere was so different. Our director was just super happy and super bubbly, and it was just a much more relaxed environment from day one. And even like throughout my peds rotation, I noticed that like the pediatric residents that we encountered were just a little bit more relaxed and happier, which was really, really nice to see, because for me, having a nice atmosphere is really important. You shouldn't let the atmosphere dictate what you do and don't want to do, but it is something to keep in mind if that's important to you. For me, that's really important to me. So inpatient is basically you're on the floor, you have your own patients ideally that you're following, and you have like rounds, you're responsible for the patient that you're assigned to, or you're with a resident and you follow along with them, and you basically go see your patient, do a physical exam on them every single day that you're there, and you might even be able to write notes on them. So personally, inpatient for me, we are doing our rotation in the summertime, and apparently there aren't that many peds patients in the summertime, so it was a little iffy. There were a lot of people there. There were 4 medical students, 2 sub-Is, and 3 residents, so it was a lot of people and not too many patients. I thought my experience overall was still fine. Like, we got to see the patients, but we were shadowing, not really shadowing, but we were like with the resident while we were looking at the patients. So it wasn't as like, we didn't have as much autonomy as I'd hoped, but again, it's a summertime, so you have to keep that in mind. And then the week of nursery was just awesome. So in nursery, you basically have healthy babies, and you do like all the reflex tests on them. You make sure they're okay. You like check their vitals, things like that. It's very laid back, and it's just so nice. You literally go around and you check out all these babies, and they're just so cute, and most of them are not crying until you try to, you know, maneuver them a bit. So that was really fun for me. And you also become like a master baby swaddler, which is like you put the blanket over the baby, and the hand movements I just did, that's what you do with the blanket apparently. So when you go through your pediatrics rotation, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. And basically, you turn the baby into like a little baby burrito, and it's just so easy to hold, and it's just so nice. Yeah, nursery was a great time. NICU is a lot more serious. NICU is more like the sick babies, the neonates that are sick. So it's like neonatal ICU. And it's a lot more serious. It's not like, you can't really interact with the babies as much because they're in these little incubators, I believe they're called, and they have like a lot of tubes, and like you don't want to mess with anything in the NICU. But the NICU, you have to be very like attentive and very serious. Like, you have to go through the labs every day, make sure like the vitals are okay, like every single thing it's very like meticulous work. So if you're into that, like you're very detail oriented, like NICU would be good for that. And then outpatient is basically like, I guess, your regular pediatricians that like when you were younger, you went to see a pediatrician, like you would wait in the waiting room, and then you go in, you go with your complaint, and then you leave. So that's the outpatient. So personally, I really like the outpatient, my outpatient time. I felt like I was given a lot of autonomy at that point, because after seeing one patient with a resident, I would be given my own room, and here you go, here's the patient. Of course, the attending would come by and like and you would present to the attending and tell them what you're thinking of, but I felt like an actual resident during my outpatient time because I was able to see my own patients, and that was really, really cool for me. And also something to keep in mind is when you're seeing a patient and they see you with a white coat, even if you introduce yourself as a medical student, they might treat you as if you're their doctor. So they're gonna ask you a ton of questions. If you don't know, make sure you say you don't know. Like, do not give them any false information. And it's totally fine to keep reiterating that you are the medical student. But yeah, like I'd be asked a lot of questions about, especially like in the pediatric population, like a lot of parents, like first-time parents, are very like antsy or a little bit like you know, they have a lot of questions. You want to make sure you're giving them the right information, especially if it has something to do with the baby. So I noticed that a lot of the patients that did come in were 0 to 1 years of age, and again, like you don't want to give them wrong information. But overall, my pediatric rotation was a really good experience. I do wish I had gotten to see more patients, like I mentioned, but I really liked the vibe. I liked that a lot of the residents that I interacted with were like willing and able to teach. Like, since there weren't as many patients, like they had a lot more time, and I guess like you should take advantage of it. I mean, any rotation is what you make of it. If you have a bunch of time and you're not doing anything, you can sit there not doing anything, or like you can go talk to a patient. I think one thing that we need to get out of the mindset is doing things for grades. Like, I don't think the rotation really is conducive to that. Like, you shouldn't do things just for a grade. For example, like some of my favorite moments were just like talking to the patients, you know, not that's not something I'm being graded on, but just having conversations with the patients and getting to know them. So now I'll tell you about some of my favorite parts of Peds. So she's 11-year-old with ulcerative colitis, and that day the patient was found to have lice. And you know, the mother had been in the hospital with the daughter for almost a week now, like at least a few days at this point, and the mother was just furious. She was absolutely furious. She you know, she thought that the daughter had gotten the lice from the hospital, and she was, you know, she was like understandably upset. The residents and students and everybody were like very on edge talking to the mother, and they kind of were like, you know, nobody go into that room, you know, let the attending and only the resident in charge of that patient go into that room. And we were like, okay. But then later on in that evening, one of my fellow classmates and I, like, we had talked to this patient before. She was one of the patients that we were following, so we had like talked to her previously. We knew like the mother is not like this. Like, we knew the mother was actually very nice, and that the only reason she was going through this was because of, like, she was upset, you know. It was a slow day, so we had a lot of time. So we ended up talking to the patient for a long time, just about like her hobbies, what she likes to do, her friends, all these things. And it was just such a great time to just sit there and talk to the patient and talk to the mother and just talk to them and get to know them for them, not just like this 11-year-old patient with ulcerative colitis, you know. And I feel like as medical students, we have the luxury of time at times to like, and we have the luxury of like filling in those gaps that a lot of times the residents or the doctors can't do because they're so busy. Like, it's like, it's our responsibility to sort of go in and fill in those gaps. Like, after you've had an encounter with a patient and you see like they're a little confused about what to do, or like what regimen to follow, or you know, what their course of what their plan is, you can go in afterwards and talk to them, and you can tell them, like, you know, in layman's terms what the doctor just said, or you can ask them if they have any questions. And like, these are things that we as medical students can do. So yeah, like, so after we talked to the patient, it was an amazing conversation. Like, it was just great. We just talked to her, literally. Like, we weren't like providing any like medical knowledge to her. We were just being there for her, and she really, really calmed down. And the next day was Saturday, and so my classmate and I weren't there, but she actually asked about us. Like, we didn't think that we did anything groundbreaking. We just had a conversation with her, but she really it was actually our last day, so we weren't able to see her anyways. But she really remembered us. And the resident later on, when she saw me like weeks later, later, she was like, oh, do you remember that patient? Yeah, that patient asked about you guys, and she was wondering like where the 2 medical students were. And so like things like that, little things like that, you know, you can have an impact on a patient. And who knows, maybe after that conversation, that patient and the mother were able to like talk to the residents better, or like communicate more efficiently and not like, you know, be on edge. And you never know. And so you can have that kind of effect on patients. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So the other thing I really liked doing was just checking on the patients like throughout the day if you're not doing anything, you know. Like for example, if you're in the call room just not doing anything, sometimes it's nice to just go around and see what the patients are up to, you know. A lot of the patients, like if they're young, they want to talk. They've been there for a while at times in inpatient, and they like having company as well. So there was this one patient, he had been in and out of the hospital. He had nephrotic syndrome, and he had been in and out of the hospital for years. And he was like everybody's favorite patient. He was super interactive. And the great thing about kids is like, no matter what their situation is, they'll just be so happy, and like they'll try to make the best of the situation, you know. At the end of the day, like sickness aside, they're still a kid, and they still have like this energy and life about them. And that's what really draws me to peds. I love that. And so yeah, this kid was so funny. He would like draw painting, like little pictures and cartoons for everybody, and it was like plastered all over the peds inpatient floors, and he was just so full of life. It was great. And then also sometimes when you go and check in on patients, you realize that, you know, they're in distress that you wouldn't have known if you're just sitting in the call room the whole time. Like there was this little baby, 9-month-old, and the baby was like crying and crying and crying, and then when we walked in, we just sort of helped like soothe the baby and like just held it, and like almost like magic, it was just like as soon as we like held the baby and just sort of like did this, the baby stopped crying. And it was just one of the best feelings ever. Like little things like that that you can do and make someone feel better, it's just really nice. And yes, another thing we had an adolescent clinic, which I'm really interested in. Contrary to popular belief about adolescents being totally like not willing to talk to you, I think the adolescents that come to the adolescent clinic actually are very open to talking to you. They deal with a lot of things, and like one of the patients we saw, she was going through a lot. Being overweight led to depression, which led to bullying, and low self-esteem, which led to like having multiple partners, which led to this clinic. And you find out, wow, this patient actually has dreams and goals and things they want to achieve in life, but these other things like their self-esteem or the bullying is preventing them from doing that. And you can sort of help bridge those things, and you can talk to them about it, and it's just great. Like sometimes all people need, especially adolescents, is someone to talk to, and it's nice to have that like to be able to have that effect on them. I thought that my peds rotation was really good. Personally, I think it solidified my decision to go into pediatrics, and I do love the aspect of like, you know, you sort of see these kids at a young age. You see them at a time where things that you say can leave a lasting impact on them, you know. Overall, the vibe that I got from pediatrics was really positive. The residents were really nice. Most of them love to teach, and I can definitely see myself going into it. So yeah, if you like these kind of videos, give this a thumbs up and maybe leave a comment, and you can subscribe, and I'll try to make more videos along the year.